Hi, and welcome to HM Pinnacle's HR Talks. I am here with Cara, and today is, I think it's Friday, May 22nd. Happy Memorial Day weekend, Cara. And we are here to talk about recruiting, which is one of our favorite topics because it means we're talking about people and inviting them into our organizations. But it can also be one of the most challenging things to talk about. So I'm glad you actually picked this topic. I wouldn't have thought we had started here today, but it makes sense as we're building out the HR toolbox to really kind of dive into this.
Hmm.
And right now is kind of one of those seasons where a lot of our clients aren't hiring. So I haven't been doing a lot of recruiting lately. I don't know about you if you've seen it in the market a lot, but it seemed to be slower right now.
Well, also with the economy, I think there can be some hesitancy to hire. And I know that we recently talked about layoffs, but this is the other side of things, or terminations as well. We talked
Happier
about
side of
that.
it.
It's a happier side, but it is May, which means we also have a ton of potentially new college graduates. So there could be a lot of folks in the market looking for opportunities. So it's an interesting topic, but I do think the landscape of recruiting has shifted slightly. And we also want to be prepared for, you know, what are new recent graduates, newer professionals, what are they looking for? How do they interview? What can we expect? And I also just have been seeing some things and would love, as always, your opinion and take on things because I always think you have really good advice on what to do. And sometimes I'm like, oh, yeah, HR is never black and white. It's always like,
It's so
let's
gray.
talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so gray. And I take that back about, not seeing a lot of recruiting. I have two clients that we've been working with that are recent graduates who we have been dealing with. And you're right, one of the first things is their LinkedIn profiles and keeping them the most up to date. It's so funny. It is probably the number one spot to make sure that you're up to date and looking good and ready to go into the market and keeping up on top of that. And I would say that for anyone, whether you're currently looking for a job or you're actively employed, just keeping up on your LinkedIn profile is critically important. One, because it really is your network into a lot of social business activities. If you're not being headhunted or looking for a position, it's also where a lot of people will find you for board positions.
Yeah.
People will find you for speaking engagements, activities, networking events, all kinds of stuff based on what they find in your profile. And I don't even want to get started on all of the different ways that you can dive into through AI, finding people inside
Oh,
their
yes.
LinkedIn communities to figure out who to send information out to, but keeping that up to date to stay engaged and make sure that you're actively involved in your community, no matter what your specialty or profession is important too. But if you are looking for a position, always keep up on your LinkedIn profile. That's one thing I've been teaching the college graduates I've been working with.
Pause. Sorry, I have a tear. Also allergies. Okay. Smiling and count to five.
Oh my gosh, you made me laugh. I'm not gonna let him take that out because that was
Uh,
awesome.
um,
But so tell me what is blooming down there that's causing your allergies?
I don't even really know, but whenever it rains, it always washes up something. So forgive me, I was trying to have
No,
that.
no, no, it's totally fine. Down in Texas, you may not have the same thing, but we have cottonwood trees here in Washington.
Oh,
And so right now it's like snow outside. It's like constant flowing of like these little
ooh.
cottonwood fluffy things. It looks really pretty. And then you go outside and it nails you and your like nose is running down your face.
We
I
have
know, totally
cedar,
off topic,
we
but
have pollen, all the things. I'm wearing yellow so that you probably can't tell when it like falls from the trees. And then they come with these little itty bitty inchworm green worms that just look like they're floating because they just are like stuck from a little string from a tree. Um, But yes, they're everywhere and it is that season and it did rain. So all of the goodies washed up. So I have allergies. So had a little tear. But
I
LinkedIn,
thought you were thinking what I was talking about was so engaging. Just kidding.
but LinkedIn I think is huge. And also because it's one of the quickest and easiest ways to get a ton of candidates for what you need. But now there's a good side and a bad side. Maybe there is if it's a entry level position, fantastic. If it's a highly specialized position, also kind of fantastic. But that also means that then you have to kind of employ the pre-screening questions or get really creative with how to maybe weed through a ton of those candidates. And you also mentioned something that this is where I think the landscape has really shifted, but AI, it is a phenomenal, phenomenal tool. We can use it to better find candidates. We can use it to just, I don't honestly, generate templates if we needed to for something. As
Yeah.
a guide, we can just, use it to help us just be more informed. However, it's meant to be a tool, not meant to replace our own unique creativity, individuality in our brains. And what I have seen, especially with an entry level role that my mom's organization is hiring for, you know, asking, hey, let's just see a writing sample. This is a client facing
Oh,
job, and we want to make sure that you can think on your feet, communicate professionally, and write emails. And you know what? We can't really use AI for every single email response. That is inefficient. And also, then I could just pay whatever AI
yeah.
platform to do the job. But I have noticed that some will use that. And so I think it's really important as hiring managers or recruiter to be able to identify. And so some key things that I've noticed, if it almost seems like they use exactly your company's mission, vision, values in the email, and also really low hanging fruit. If they have the brackets that say insert recipient name here, that probably means they did not create that. So
The
until
other one is the ending where it always says like best regards, best regards, best
uh,
regards. And you're like, oh come on, no one says best regards anymore. Like you know that is AI generated. Like, come on, at least take that off and put your own like ending to it. You're right though. You can tell there are some very specific things that you always can immediately point out and you're like, okay, this was not written. And you're right. You want human initial contact when you're talking, especially in entry level roles, customer facing roles, client facing roles, right? You want to know that people can build relationships. And if all they're doing is through AI generated communication, they're not building relationships and they're not going to be the right person for the role. And so if you're looking for a position, think that one through before all you do is plug it through and chat GPT or another tool, right?
exactly.
Make sure you're thinking, okay, that's maybe a good start, but now let's take that and let's pull it apart and make it about you. What
Yes.
components in here do you want to keep? And then what do you need to make so that there's talking more about you before you plug that together and send it out?
Have it be a coffee filter. Use
Yeah.
it to be like, all right, I just need a little bit of help. It's great if there's an emotionally charged email, for example, and you're trying to say, like, I'm trying to respond in a way that does not um, kind of emote the same type of feelings I'm having right now. So let me just plug it
Yeah.
in. Have it be a filter, but do not have it be your sole source of, I guess, information or professional communication. And I would also say, and this happened at a previous organization, it was a technical role, and everything looked really great from the resume. They were able to speak eloquently with the phone screen, but when it got to the technical demonstration of their skills, the more technical recruiters noticed that this particular individual kept on typing things off to the screen. There was an odd delay that can even be used for coding, whatever type of technical computer work can be done. So I would also encourage recruiters if or hiring managers, if there is something that requires a higher degree of technical expertise, what kind of work samples or what type of technical interviews can you do live to just ensure that, yes, this person truly is able to do the minimum requirements of this role? And I hate that we have to say that, but it is true. Now, Heather, we talked about this. It's always nice chance to give grace. We have a hard line, but
Yeah.
I have seen if people provide an email or a writing sample that is AI generated, it's okay to say, hey, thank you so much, but we'd love something a little bit more professionally personal to you. Can you provide an email you sent, a white paper, something that would be relevant? You can always redact the identifying information, but can you just share something that you've written previously? If they're willing to do that, it shows initiative. And then, you can also just give them the benefit of the doubt of maybe they just were excited or nervous or they weren't sure what to provide. And therefore, now they have something additional. So, something to think
Yeah,
about.
no, that's a smart way to do it. And you have to, as an employer, realize you have that ability to ask that question, right? It's okay to ask for something different. It's okay to ask for something more. It's okay to clarify. You're hiring someone, right? You're paying them. You want to make sure that you're getting what you're asking for and that they are meeting those minimum qualifications, like you said. We have a client right now that's looking for a bilingual recruiter, right? And they don't speak Spanish, the individual hiring. And so, it's one of those things where you can't assume because they say they speak
Yeah.
Spanish that that's true, right? How are you going to test that skill set? And is it just basic Spanish, like conversational, or are they going to actually be able to recruit in
Yeah.
Spanish? There's a big difference between the two of those. And so making sure that you are figuring out what the skill level is that you need, and then
Mhm.
testing for that skill level is critically important before you bring someone in. One, because you don't want to waste the time and the money recruiting and then actually hiring and training, because that is one of the most expensive things there
Yep.
is. And two, you don't want to set them up for failure either. Because if they don't know the exact level of expectation or skill that you're looking for, and you hire them in, they're assuming that what they have is what you're looking for. That's
Mhm.
the other thing as an employer. You have to be careful that you're not setting someone up when you hire them for failure because you haven't given them a real true understanding of the skill level that you're
Yes.
expecting from them, right? And then they come in and it's not what they needed, what they were expecting, and then it's a fail, right? And you want to make
Mhm.
sure that's not the situation either.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that because yes, it's not just about we want a good match for our organization. We see a gap and we need to fill. It's about the person. I
Mhm.
think all of us have a story of a really great hire and also maybe a learning experience hire. I'll call them that.
Okay, do you have one, Cara?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm trying to think back, but yes, I do think that I have seen a couple where they, I think, came in and it was an industry shift. And I think the expectations of the industry, with me being located in Austin, Texas, tech, this was during the time where, tech was booming, labs were all the rage. It's very fast paced, very chaotic. And for a recruiting role, actually, it was a tech recruiting role, highly competitive. And there was a little bit of a shift in understanding communication because with recruiting, there's also a selling component and a negotiation component. This
Yeah, absolutely.
individual that we hired, great intentions, experience in a different industry that was a little bit more transactional, I would call it, a recruiting style. It was just a very, all right, you have the skills, come on in, let's go, kind of a thing. And when we brought them in to do a more specialized, highly competitive software engineers type of sales, where this organization was not the not the best in compensation, not the best in benefits. It was like, how can you sell that and make it appealing? And so
Yeah.
this individual was not set up to succeed because we did not include the sales and the negotiation components in our job description. And I can talk for
About
years
job
about job
descriptions
descriptions because I
forever.
love job descriptions. Um, but this is also so not only did the company waste time, resources, and money on someone who wasn't the right fit. But that poor individual, this was not a knock on them. They really did try their best, but it wasn't a good
Wasn't a good
fit
fit.
for them.
Yeah.
And they did have recruiting experience. They did have the kind of practical application skills, but not those kind of soft skills or the pace or the environmental knowledge to be able to truly succeed in that role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And it's a great example of what employers and HR really need to understand is that it's a two-way fit. It
It
really is.
is.
And you have to make sure that it's both directions before their first day, not after their first day,
Right.
but before their first day. And it also sometimes you forget about it, but it impacts the entire team that they're
It
coming to
does.
work with, right? So here you are, you get this person, you don't fully vet them, which is part of what recruiting is all about, right? You don't fully vet them. You get them on board, they come into it, they're getting ready to come into an organization. They don't know what their expectations are because you haven't fully vetted them, but they're coming on because they think they're the right fit. You think they're the right fit. So you've blasted out an email to everybody. Everyone's getting ready. You've set up all of this onboarding. Everyone's been doing double work because they're waiting for this person to come on board.
Yeah.
This person comes on board. It's not a good fit right away. It
Oh,
takes
yeah.
weeks to figure that out, right? So there's this uncomfortableness in this team where they know already because they're smart and they know what the expectations were for skills. They know it's not working. They're trying to figure it out. And then the person ends up leaving. And then this team now is restructuring again to try and figure out how to absorb that work. They feel like the leaders don't understand what they do because they brought in the wrong fit. So it causes so much chaos when you
It
don't take the
does.
time to make sure that you're recruiting correctly.
And it feels good when, as an individual, when you're doing something or when you're in a place to thrive and you're doing the things that you're good at and you love, it is easy to like jump in and like want to work.
Yeah.
I think at least I'm like, oh, I love Excel spreadsheets. I love job descriptions. Like Put me in, coach. And so, when you find someone who likes the things that it's always important to hire to the job description, not the person as well.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Always be thinking about, wow, if even though I might love this human being and they might be a sweet person, a smart person, they may not be the right fit for the role. And that is okay. Because if you were to bring them in just because you think that they're going to be great, if they're an introvert and you're forcing them to do cold calling every day, that is going to drain them so fast. So, something to think about for sure. And also, I think the benefit of, and we kind of talked about this new generation of folks coming in to the workplace, if and when we want to hire. One thing that I have noticed, and actually I admire, but it also needs to be balanced. There is a great sense of confidence, while also a strong sense of boundary setting. So, what I
Mm,
mean by that is, I love it. Okay, you know what? I want to make space for my family. I want to make space for what's important to me. But at what point can you kind of draw the line? Because I will be dating myself here again, but some of my friends are now millennial managers. It's their first time managing teams of people,
yeah.
and they've kind of shared a shift and something that they've been struggling with and hiring and and also in entry level management is okay, so my brother's sisters or my brother's girlfriend's dad's cat passed away. And I'm just really impacted by that. And so I need to take a day off. And it's like, I want to be an understanding manager. I want to be there for you. But
No, it's
that seems like
impossible.
an odd thing.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I have these times to recruit. And I actually have seen this. Hey, there are 3 times within the next week and a half. Would love to meet with you for a 30-minute virtual chat. And then it doesn't get scheduled for 3 weeks out because they would rather, oh, I have a vacation booked or I have like a doctor's appointment that morning. And it's like, how do we balance the boundary setting with a sense of urgency and professionalism? I I don't know. What do you like?
It blows my mind. And it was funny that you just said that because I was just on a call about an hour ago with a leader of an organization that's a client, and she was quite frustrated, right? We talked, it's Memorial Day weekend, and so it's a long weekend. And
Mhm.
so there is an excessive amount of absenteeism in her employee group today, making an even longer weekend. And their reasons were things like, oh, my allergies hit today, so I need to take the day off. Oh, my
Mhm.
power didn't go back on until like a half an hour before I had to be to work, so I can't make it in today. I'm sorry, what? Throw a hat on and some deodorant and get your butt to the office. Like, I don't understand these things. Like, what on earth? It's
It,
that kind of concept, and you're like, but people are impacted by those really poor decisions on your part. And not only the people that you're serving, because it's an education for this particular purpose,
I
but
see.
also, and this is the part that they don't understand, the people who are now filling in for you because you're not there. So you're impacting your team as well.
Mm,
And so I think that's one of the things that I would say we need to, as leaders, refocus because you can't change. You're not going to be able to change their mindset
mhm.
about themselves. This generation wants balance, and you're not going to change that. There's nothing we can do. It has been ingrained in them from childhood.
Mhm.
And I think as the generation Z moves in and then the generation Alpha starts, I think that generation will be a little bit different because their
Exactly.
parental style is different, right?
Yep. Always.
But through the generation Z, we're stuck. And it's going to be a balance. That's what they
Mhm.
want. And so what you have to do is you have to learn how to utilize what's important to them to regain
Exactly.
control, right?
Hmm.
I don't mean control them, control the environment, control your work, right? As a leader, we have to control the business. That is our job, not people, business.
Hmm.
And I want to be clear on that because I would never say control people. But to control the business, you have to regenerate your thought patterns, right? So
Hmm.
even though you and I are rolling our eyes about people who can't see their way to work because they have a sneezing nose
I
or
mean, I have another itch right now, so I might have to hop off this
you are not
podcast.
hopping off this call, Missy. Or because, or because their brother's uncle's cat just passed, right? I appreciate because I'm an animal lover, but I appreciate that. But what you have to do is go, okay, what is it that's important to this generation?
Mhm.
community,
Yes.
impact, right? Family,
Mhm.
commitment, values, right?
Very
These
much
are the
so.
things that are important. And when you say those words, they're important to you and I too, even though you and I
Mhm.
are of totally different generations than that. And you and I are even of different generations from each other. But
Mhm.
those five words mean the same thing to you and I. Like I would stand on these five words just like you would. And they're important in our work environment. But reframe those words.
Yeah.
If you reframe those words, so community, impact, let's move those into how we treat our fellow employees. How does that impact the people we work with? Is
Mhm.
our community, and are we building as leaders this group of people that each of our employees work with as their community? What are
Yes.
we doing to create community inside of our organization? Because then
Mhm.
they feel like they're letting down their community, that they're impacting their community by making these unwise, rash decisions in those moments. That's how we have to change our brain, I believe. I believe as
Absolutely.
leaders, we have to rethink what we're doing inside of our organization to make that next generation look at this as part of their community, as part of what they can impact, as part of how they find value,
Mhm.
right? And once we can figure out how to do that, then those decisions won't be made the same way because they'll be like, if I'm doing that, I'm impacting these people I care about. I'm making something of value go away for others. Other people are going to now have to work twice as hard on a Friday of a holiday week and potentially have to work
Mhm.
late because of this decision I'm making. And they may change their minds. So I
I
think
love that.
leaders need to look at it differently and make adjustments. And I know that has nothing to do with recruiting, but I
But
think,
it does,
oh,
because
okay,
I
lay it on
think
me.
this
How
is
does
how
that?
you can position your organization. If you can focus, and let's say you have a company website or you have your job post and you want to talk about benefits, I think if you can highlight, how you can create an internal culture of community, of impact, and of friendships, because there was an employee engagement survey question that was, I have a best friend in the workplace. That was the number one, or at least one of the top three indicators of if someone would stay at their organization. Because if you have a best friend at the company, or if you feel like you can have friends, when you are grieving the loss of that cat, maybe you'd want to stay in that workplace because you're like, best buddy Heather will be here to comfort me as I mourn the loss of brother's uncle's cat, whatever it might be. So,
Yeah.
and I
That's,
think that's
I didn't
really
think of it that way, but you're
valuable.
right. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. Plugging that into how you recruit is, I think, important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, and this is a totally other topic, and I think we should totally do a podcast on it, but how you, as a leaders, develop that community and what other
Right.
things you could do inside your organization culturally long term to create that impact. Everything from how you use social media in your organization
Mm-hmm.
to what you do for outside
Mm-hmm.
activities with your employees, et cetera, et cetera. And I totally would dive down a rabbit hole because I have some great ideas on that. But going back to the recruiting component, you're right. I think that's part of benefits. It really
Mm-hmm.
is making that a community. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Like
And
that should be part of how you plug it.
we absolutely, I think, can get into a whole benefits section talking about what benefits would matter to this generation, because what matters to one generation is vastly different from what matters to another. So we have to also be aware of how this is, let's be real, recruiting, and there is a sales component. You have to make it an attractive package, and you want it to be a win-win, not just for you as the business owner, but also for the individual to thrive and succeed and feel appropriately compensated and appropriately valued through those benefits, whether tangible or intangible, to make that place where they can really get creative, feel comfortable failing in your organization so that they can, help with innovation as well. So lots of things are there. Now, we talked a little bit about AI and Grace and just kind of like showing how to take care of our new generation of workers with, boundary setting. But I did have a scenario that I would love to have your help with of
Oh, okay.
at what point with boundary setting or cancellations of interviews do you say, okay, we are going to reschedule this interview, or you know what, no. So there was a candidate recently who about less than 5 minutes before the scheduled time of an interview sent an email that said,
An
hey,
email.
I'm so sorry. There's an emergency and I have to reschedule the interview. The hiring manager said, with that time frame, I would not like to move forward with this candidate. Do you agree? Disagree? How would you have handled that situation? Because I am a little bit of a bleeding heart where I'm like, oh no, an emergency. What could that be? Maybe we should reschedule. But this hiring
Okay.
manager said, yeah, so yeah, but I could just talk
Okay.
about,
Okay.
yeah, you tell me.
So, first of all, ghosting is a pet peeve of mine. And second, it is very, very rampant in the environment right now.
Okay.
And it is rampant in the environment because, unfortunately, the younger generation has a tendency not to do well with conflict.
Mm,
And it is outrightly known that they do not do well. It doesn't matter whether it's in relationships, it doesn't matter whether it's with a sales pitch over the phone, it doesn't
mhm,
matter whether it's breaking up with somebody. I mean, think about it. People, they break up with people over a text message nowadays, right? It's not a face-to-face interaction or communication, right? And so not wanting to go to a job interview or changing your mind about a job or quitting a job, it
mm,
happens very much over a passive aggressive way in an email or a text message, etc., because they don't have confrontational skills. They haven't been
mm.
trained to do that. And so that's part of what the ghosting thing is happening right now.
Okay.
I absolutely can't stand it because I think it's so disrespectful. But I need a couple pieces of information before I can answer your question.
Okay.
The first one is, does this candidate have the company's phone number?
I do not believe they do. No,
So the only communication form they have is email.
it was through email, correct. But it
Okay.
was 1 minute before the scheduled time. I think that was what the hiring manager reacted to the most. The other piece of information was the emergency, which completely entitled to this. It was just the emergency. There was no elaboration on could it have been the cat? Absolutely. Could it have also been something significantly more, closer to home? Also, yes. So we do not know.
So here's what I would tell you. If you asked the younger me, earlier in my career, let's say 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have said, absolutely no way would I give that person the time of day again because shame on them for waiting to the last second. They
Okay.
absolutely don't want the job and they should have worked harder for getting to the interview on time. The now Heather, who
Okay.
has been through so much life in general on my own, has a lot more understanding and empathy and knowledge of how crazy this world works
Mm,
to say, I absolutely would give them one more shot. And here's why.
mm,
Because I have personally, and maybe you have too, Cara, but I have personally been in an emergency situation where the last thing I'm thinking about is an appointment that I am going to miss if I am sitting in the hospital waiting room with my husband because
mm.
he broke his toe, or
Yeah.
he hasn't broke his toe, but I'm just using it as an example, or because I recently for me, I had taken Steele to the emergency animal hospital on Sunday morning when he got
Mm,
so ill, right? Before he passed. And
yeah.
I didn't think of anybody. And I had things going on that day. And I missed calls, I missed appointment times that day because you know what? There was nothing on my mind in that moment at all. And I text people afterwards to apologize for missing things because I couldn't think, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes emergencies really do happen where you don't think about it the half an hour beforehand because you're in the depths of it
Hmm.
to where you go, oh my gosh, I had something I needed to do, but it's so hard to pull yourself away from whatever you're in the middle of in that emergency to send the message. Here's what I'd say. If they really didn't want to, they wouldn't have sent a message at all. They would have just stepped away,
I like that. I
right?
really, really like that.
They
Um,
did take the time to send the message, and and I'd say if someone said, well, they didn't tell me what the emergency was, I'd say shame on you. Because you know what?
mm,
it it wouldn't matter like because we don't get to judge someone else's
that's true.
emergency level, right? Or their personal issues, right? I would find it unprofessional. So if somebody texted me and said, "Hey, I have an emergency, a family emergency or an emergency. I'm so sorry, I'm unable to make it," I would find that professional. If somebody said, "Hey, you know what? My kid was out playing basketball and he broke his arm, and my husband's at work, and so he's not able to come pick him up. So I had to miss this meeting so that I could go and pick him up to take him to the hospital. I'm so sorry I missed it." Now I'm like, I don't need all your family drama. First of all, and second of all, now I have in the back of my head, you have too much family drama. So now that's a stereotype that I now have about you. And then third, I'm like, does that mean you're not dependable at work, right? So you've now filled my brain with too many pieces of information
Ah,
that I don't want, because it now adds another layer to me interviewing you that I shouldn't have, because I don't want that background info. And I no longer find our communication professional, and I don't know you, so
mm,
I want it professional. If you're an employee of mine, I absolutely want a different kind of communication. But as someone who is just interviewing, you want your best foot forward. So why would you want to provide more personal information? Because that just skews how you think about me, right? So I love the fact that they just put the basic information in
mm,
there. They did communicate instead of not communicating. You can't value whether it was 1 minute before or not, because you don't know what exactly was going on in that
that's
scenario.
true.
So yes, I would have given him a second shot. If anything else happened, I would never have given him a third.
I really like that because that's been sitting in my gut because that I was thinking, okay, yeah, sure, we'll reschedule. But the hiring manager at that time was just so hesitant to continue because it she viewed it as a sign of unprofessionalism that it was so close to the time and that it was just so rapidly sent. Now, granted, this is was an entry level position and we had a influx of candidates, a ton of interviewees. And so this is where I will say I did use Chat GPT. I mean, I had my template, but I really struggled because I disagreed with the approach taken. So I did rely on some guidance of we've already set a time. We're hesitant to move forward. How can I position this in a way that doesn't make the candidate feel like it was their fault necessarily? And so the messaging sent was, as you can imagine, we have had so many candidates and your time is really valuable. Please take all the time that you need to address your emergency. But at this time, we will be moving forward with other candidates that are more closely aligned or something like that. But it was a really tough one for me to write because I was like, oh, I know this. But
Did you hear back from the candidate after that when
she
you
was
sent it?
very, very gracious and very kind. And I will say that is also one of the hard parts sometimes when you're assisting with, as HR, sometimes we can be that middle person of we do what's best for the company while always trying to keep the employee or the candidate and give them the best experience. And that's a really hard place to be because we're often in the middle of sometimes we can see both sides, but we ultimately have to do what's best for the organization, but without diminishing respect and dignity for the individual. So that kind of ties into even how we do terminations. Now, I do have two more red flag. I mean, you're doing kind of like
Okay.
resume screens that I would love your take on.
Okay.
First one is, what do you do if you see a candidate that might be overqualified?
Oh, I hate that word. I hate that word. So probably because in my career, I have been overqualified many, many times for roles. Um, no one is ever overqualified for a job. You are lucky and blessed if someone wants to work for you and has more skills than you're asking for.
Mm,
And that's the bottom line. If someone wants to work for your company, there's a reason. And if the reason is, hey, I'm desperate for a job, you know what? Evaluate that, right? Talk
yeah.
them through it. Are you desperate for this moment? Are you still looking for something else? Because is this so much less than what you were previously making that you're going to leave? Have a frank conversation with them, right?
Hmm.
But if they're wanting a position because they're burnt out from having a higher level position,
Yes.
because they're towards the end of their career and they want something that they can leave in the end of their career doing something that's meaningful and impactful, but at a lesser level, because their skills are such that they want to go back to something that they enjoyed more than what they were
Hmm.
previously doing. There are so many reasons that people who have these big careers or large amounts of expertise want something else. Don't assume why.
Yeah.
And don't assume that they don't want it because they are going to want too much money, etc., right?
Hmm.
Because you have no idea. And especially nowadays, even more so, because titles mean nothing.
Yeah,
You can have a CFO who makes $40,000 a year in a tiny startup company, and you can have a CFO who makes $500,000 a year in a billion-dollar company, right?
that's
The
right.
title doesn't mean anything. So don't
Mhm.
assume because the title CFO, they're going to be too hot, heavy of a price tag for you to pay, right? So be careful to assume that you're overqualified. Assume that, hey, there's a reason they applied for the job. Find out why.
Yeah.
Because if they have all of the skills that you're looking for and they're interested in working for you, find out if they really are going to be a good fit. Because you'd be blessed and lucky to get all of those extra skills and qualities for the job, as well as the ones that they have.
Oh, I love that. And and I actually will say this is really personal to me because my dad he was impacted in the early 2000s when I think the tech bubble burst at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'll put it to you this way. I was in high school and my sister was in college. So he was of a certain bracket that made it very hard to find jobs. And he
Mhm.
was told things, quite frankly, that should not be told in an HR conversation, like he
Yeah.
was too old for positions or he was too overqualified, when in truth, he is a very wise, successful man who just was at a bad stroke of luck,
Mhm.
was one of many who were impacted just because of multiple layoffs that happened. But
Yeah.
trying to restart a career, and I have had the privilege of having conversations in previous recruiting lives here, but they were folks that said, this is just a passion project for me. I have been
Mhm.
lucky enough to make money. It's not about
Yeah.
money anymore. I just want to have fun. I want to do something that I am passionate about, and I like your organization and what you stand for, and I just want to do this. And my husband's role as well, he actually hires a lot of retired law enforcement officers because they're sitting nice, but they still want to be productive and useful with their
Engaged.
time
They
and
want to do
engaged.
something with the skills that they have.
And it's really good work. And so I love that both with that last situation of a last minute cancellation, which is different from ghosting. Last
Mhm.
minute
Totally.
cancellation is different from ghosting. And also, I would say ghosting with a follow up after with a similar reason, because I did have someone who didn't show up and I reached out and I was like, hey, everything okay? The hiring manager's on the call. And they were like, to your point, I'm so sorry. My aunt just passed. We were very close and I was recovering.
Yeah.
May I please have some time and reschedule for next week? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to qualify that
Yeah.
ghosting is different from a last minute cancellation. Like
Absolutely.
same with overqualified. The last one I have is what about job hoppers? Millennials were known as being millennial job hoppers. And
Yes, they
again, a
are.
personal one for me.
Yes, they are. This one I struggle a bit with this one. So I'm not going to be able to change anyone's mind on this one way or the other. And I think business owners, they have an opinion one way or the other, and they're not gonna, there's nothing I can say that's gonna sway them from an HR perspective because you've got, and it's based on how long you've had a career. It really is.
Mm,
Business owners who have been in the same industry in a similar role or the same role for multiple years struggle to see the value in someone who changes jobs regularly, and there's nothing you can say that will ever bring value to that to them. And then you have business owners, especially startup ones, who have
mhm.
jumped from company to company and they see the value that doing that and staying for a couple of years brings from learning lots and lots about a company and the dynamics and changes, and then the flexibility of being able to go to another company, use that and grow, and then the flexibility, right? Or the career path growth when
Mhm.
you're working through and not having it in a single organization to be able to go from company to company to do that. So you've got polarized opinions on that.
Yes.
Personally, I am a big believer that uh, moving from position to position or organization to organization is healthy if you stay there long enough to gain expertise in what you do. And
Mhm.
that that should be no less than a year to 2 years.
Okay.
I think anything less than that, and really I'd say 18 months to 2 years,
Mhm.
anything
I
less than
agree.
that, and you have not gained enough job knowledge to be able to say that you know how to do that job well enough that you can move on to something else somewhere else and bring that same value.
Hmm.
Then you're just looking for a better pay, a better title, whatever, more benefits, whatever it is. Then you're really job hopping. And job hopping is different than career growth, in
Mm,
my
I like that.
opinion. Job hopping is looking for the grass is always greener on the other side. You're always looking for the bigger, better.
Hmm.
And those are the people who are always on Indeed or LinkedIn,
Yeah.
half the time sitting at their desk on Indeed or LinkedIn
Okay.
looking
Yeah.
for the next job, right? Because they're never satisfied with what they have. They're always wanting something more. And they're the same people who are in your office as a leader asking when their next raise is or when the
Mm-hmm.
next, career move is, right? Those are job hoppers. And I struggle with that because they're not investing in what they're learning and doing now to be able to truly provide something to the company for that growth. People who are on career trajectories, whether internally or externally, are different. Those are individuals who come in and absorb and invest in the
Mm,
position and the organization and their expertise, depending upon the type of role, 18 to 2 years to 3 years. And they have that knowledge, and whether it's internally or externally, they take it to grow. I don't have a problem with that. And I find that I like people like that because they show flexibility, they
hmm.
show skill sets in multiple areas, multiple organizations, they show that they have an ability to work with lots of dynamic teams.
Hmm.
I find a lot of value in that. I sometimes struggle with people who've worked in the same company for 20, 30 years because sometimes it's hard, and you've
Yeah.
probably seen this too. Sometimes it's hard to see how they can adapt to change and new environments when they
Mm,
leave a job of 20 or 15 years
yeah.
to a new organization where absolutely everything is different and they have to figure out how to change everything that they know how to do.
I agree. This is like a hard thing. It's either too hot, too cold. But
Yeah.
from what you said as well, and the kind of I like that this has been like your consistent theme throughout of ask the question, show grace if you don't know. Now this is hard when you're looking at a resume, but to your point, I think if they've been in an organization, whether it was for 18 months or 20 years, what was the career path like with it? Were they in the same role the entire time, or was there rapid growth? Because I think if it's a job hopper and there was rapid growth, it shows that maybe there was some stuff going on in that organization that was hard on that particular role. If they were in the same organization, like the same role for 20 years, it might actually show a resistance to change, a lack of ability to evolve as an organization evolves. And so this is a tough one, yeah, because I feel like when you look at a resume, and I'm guilty of it too, where sometimes I'm like, oh, that person was only here for X amount, that must be a concern. But then I remember I was a millennial, a job hopper as well. And it was 18 months was expected of a professional in Austin at the time. That was like the average tenure for somebody because companies were getting bought out, the cultures were changing. Then
Yeah.
sometimes roles were redundant. It wasn't, and for me personally, my first two jobs out of college were less than a year because I was learning what maybe I liked and didn't like to do. I was the introvert in an outside sales, business to business, door to door job. That was really hard. I did that for 9 months until I got my next opportunity, which then helped launch everything else. I would say, though, if granting a phone screen, allow the candidate to share their story. I was laid off because of COVID, or the company was bought out and my role was redundant, or there was some sort of moral or ethical dilemma in this organization that I couldn't stand for. And so I had to leave. Give them the chance to explain why. Or maybe it was really loyal to this organization for X, Y, and Z reasons. The reason why I'm changing roles is this. And dig in. If we know that, hey, talk to me why you changed jobs, or how would you react to changing to a new organization after being at this, or what's prompting you to leave now? Ask the question, and then you can figure out more. So
Yeah,
I,
it's all about the communication.
mhm,
Honest communication is going to be the best way for you to find out whether or not it's something you really need to worry about, or you're going to find out more about their personality, their style, what's makes them
yeah,
tick, right? And that's important. I would also say, in something that you probably know, and you probably don't even put it on your resume, but don't go too far back on your resumes.
Yes.
People should not put too many years back on your resumes.
Yep.
You don't have to have every job you've ever worked, right?
Yep.
I caution people when I get like 15-page resumes back to like 1942, and
One
you're like,
page.
I'm sorry, what? What are you doing?
Yep.
And then never put the years you graduated. That's another thing I remind people. Don't ever
Ooh, I
put
need to
your
take that off.
graduation.
I have my year, I think, on mine.
Yeah, because it ages you. You
Yeah,
automatically know how old the candidate is that you're looking at based on when they graduated from high school and college.
that is a good one. What about throwing a curveball at you? I did not put this on there. Pictures on resumes. I've been
Never.
seeing more of that. I agree. I
Never put
agree.
pictures. And nowadays, especially Washington State, they tell you not to, but in many other states are going that direction too. But don't put your address on them either,
Agree. You
because
can say,
there's a lot of concern about discrimination based on location. So they
oh,
tell you not to put, yeah, because of certain cities, certain areas of cities that have less reputable reputations. So yeah,
fascinating.
I know. I would never think of that because I don't pay enough attention to cities to know that, but so they tell
So
you not to put that.
okay, so would you recommend putting maybe like state or maybe work authorization, like authorized to work in the United States without sponsorship, or like US citizen, or nothing, none of that?
Nope,
Just
I don't put any
your
of that. I put
professional
I
experience.
always say phone number is important
Okay.
and LinkedIn profile is always important. And the reason I don't is because what if you live like we have someone that we work with right now who lives in Wisconsin and she just graduated and she's looking for a job in Washington, right? But if you put a Wisconsin address on there, no one in Washington, when you're applying for it, they're going to think, oh, they're just randomly applying for jobs, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't get a chance to put a cover letter with it, and a lot of places don't let you anymore, you just apply directly off of, the
Mhm.
website and it just wants a resume. So don't put your address, your LinkedIn
Oh,
profile, and your phone number.
okay, no photos, no address, no work
No date.
authorization, which can be a pre-screening question anyhow. So add that to your job posting. Okay. I feel like we covered so
So
much because we went from like kind of like generational quirks to now a bit more of the nitty gritties, and then kind of talking about bad hires and good hires. But there is so much to be said for recruiting because we didn't even get into like how to find the best candidate in a pool of a jillion, or what to say and not to say. There's so much more that
I
could be
know.
said.
Interviewing, when to interview, how to interview. Yeah, there's so much to it.
No, this is just a peek in the door,
That's right.
but it is going to be hopefully a good Memorial Day weekend for you and your family.
Sunshine.
But
You
with
too.
that,
Enjoy the
thank
sun.
you. It's going to be hot here in Texas, so we'll try not to say the city. But with that, this does conclude our HR talks with HM Pinnacle. So just remember, if you think you've had a bad day in HR, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. So thank you for spending time with HM Pinnacle. Until next time.